Following the unprecedented success of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Sorcerer's Stone in 2001, Warner Brothers quickly greenlit the sequel to keep momentum going. But it had to walk a fine line, remain faithful to J.K. Rowling's increasingly darker second book, while evolving the characters and tone to match the maturing themes and audience expectations. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets followed Harry's second year at Hogwarts, where a series of strange attacks terrorise the students, and an ancient school legend appears to come to life. As fear spreads and secrets unravel, Harry and his friends must uncover the truth behind the mysterious Chamber of Secrets before it's too late. Chris Columbus returned to direct, though Frank Oz claimed that he was approached for the job and he turned them down as he wasn't interested. Columbus returned for the second installment, bringing back his reliable tone of whimsy and respect for the source material, though even he admitted the Chamber of Secrets would demand more emotion and intensity than its predecessor. The pre-production phase began even before the first film was released. Rowling's second novel introduced new mythology, creatures and darker themes, including prejudice, isolation and ancient secrets, which pose significant challenges in terms of visual effects and narrative complexity. Steve Kloves once again adapted the screenplay, carefully trimming the 341-page novel while maintaining its key arcs and mystery structure. The story required new sets, more action-heavy scenes and deeper character development, all of which called for increased ambition on set. Most of the original cast returned, but some key new characters included Kenneth Branagh as Gilderoy Lockhart, the vain and cowardly Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, which was originally offered to Alan Cumming, but he angrily rejected it upon finding out that the producers had lied about his salary. Hugh Grant was then chosen, but he was forced to drop out due to scheduling conflicts with 2 weeks' notice. Jude Law auditioned but was considered too young. Don't feel too bad, Jude, you'll come back into the franchise later.
Imagine that.
Before they finally landed on Kenneth Branagh. Many believe that this character was based on J.K. Rowling's ex-husband, which she denied, but hey, fair play, he provides the only post-credit scene in Harry Potter history.
I think it's brilliant.
Branagh's flamboyant performance brought both comedy and smarm to the role, and he was praised for fully committing to the character's ridiculous bravado. Jason Isaacs as Lucius Malfoy, Draco's aristocratic and sinister father. Richard E. Grant and Bill Nighy tried out. Don't feel too bad, Bill, you'll come back into the franchise later.
Imagine that.
Before the producers settled on Jason Isaac. He had actually previously auditioned for Lockhart as well, but the producers urged him to try out for Lucius instead. However, Isaacs felt it was too similar to his role as Captain Hook in Peter Pan, and only did the audition out of politeness, and he very nearly turned the part down once he'd got it, until his family members persuaded him otherwise. Furthermore, in the books, the character was merely described as strongly resembling his son, but it was Isaacs himself who requested him to have long hair to differentiate between him and Tom Felton's Draco, because apparently 30 years of age wouldn't be enough.
Exactly.
And he rewatched the first film in order to better match Felton's performance. Isaac's portrayal introduced a sharp antagonist with real-world echoes of elitism and prejudice, and Shirley Henderson as Moaning Myrtle, a ghost with a tragic past, adding pathos and eccentricity to the haunted halls of Hogwarts. The film also introduced Voldemort's younger self before he missed a meal and went all apocalyptic, and Eddie Redmayne and Klaus himself, Joseph Morgan, both tried out before the part went to Christian Coulson, despite being 23 at the time, and the audition age range was between 15 and 17. Don't feel too bad, Eddie, you'll come back in the franchise later.
Imagine that.
Not only did the cast return, but so did the production designers, allowing the two films to look very similar, before the sequel says, screw it!
Strange.
Filming began on November the 19th, 2001, just 3 days after the release of the first movie, taking place mostly in Hertfordshire in the Leeds Den Film Studios, as well as on the Isle of Man. With the first movie's success, the budget and ambition were both increased. The Chamber of Secrets itself was a massive waterlogged set filled with stone serpent carvings and a looming statue of Salazar Slytherin. The flying car sequence was filmed with a full-size Ford Anglia mounted on a gimbal in front of green screens and miniatures. Dobby the house elf, a fully CGI character, was one of the most complex digital creations of the time. Actor Toby Jones provided Dobby's distinct voice, and animators worked tirelessly to make his expressive movements believable and sympathetic. Scenes with Dobby actually required Daniel Radcliffe to act opposite a tennis ball on a stick, guided by animators and puppeteers. The crew contained 70 people bringing the story to life, but the most physically challenging was Aragog, the giant spider, which stood at 9 feet tall with an 18-foot leg span. Each leg had to be controlled by a different member of the crew, and the entire thing weighed 3/4 of a ton, requiring over 15 people to operate completely. John Williams was also unable to compose a full musical score as he was busy destroying Star Wars that year, so William Ross was brought in to finish up the job, reworking themes from the first film and adding more dynamic compositions, including the haunting Fawkes the Phoenix and eerie motifs for the chamber itself. Sound design became more intricate, including snake hisses, echo effects, and environmental ambience that added depth and tension to Hogwarts' incredible increasingly mysterious halls. Specifically, the Whomping Willow, because every safe school needs a giant killer tree on site,
Clearly.
was the voice of sound editor Randy Tom slowed down and with an enhanced bass. The mandrakes were also a combination of baby cries and female screams, but the hardest was the giant Basilisk, which was a combination of Tom's voice, tiger roars, and horse and elephant vocalizations. Columbus also insisted on using handheld camera work for the majority of the shoot to allow for more freedom of movement, and Roger Pratt was brought on board as the director of photography to give the film a darker and edgier look than its predecessor, to show that the filmmaking had grown up just like the characters. Columbus also wanted the camera to mimic the motions of an actual snake like in the story. He would often grab the cameraman's shoulders and steer him around the set to get the shot exactly how he wanted. That's actually really clever.
I understand.
There's also the snake language of Parseltongue, which had to be created audibly for the movie, bringing in University of Cambridge linguistics professor Francis Nolan to do so, though J.K. Rowling had created a guide to teach everyone how to speak it, before filming wrapped in July of 2002. Tragically, this was the last appearance of Richard Harris as Albus Dumbledore, who passed away shortly before the film's release. His gentle, wise portrayal would be remembered as a foundational part of the franchise's early tone. As the film was going through the final editing processes, producer David Heyman visited Harris in hospital, and despite being extremely weak from the illness, he insisted that the character not be recast. Well, this is awkward. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was released on November the 3rd, 2002, and it Wingardium Leviosaed its way through several box office records, opening at $88.4 million during its opening weekend, making it the third largest opening of all time, behind Spider-Man and the Philosopher's Sister's aunt's cousin Sorcerer's Dogfood's dentist Mum's Stone. Though slightly less than its predecessor, it solidified the franchise's staying power and proved that the magic was far from fading. Critics generally praised the film's faithfulness to the book, darker tone, and improved performances. Some felt the pacing dragged slightly due to the book's dense mystery structure, but the production values and world building were universally applauded. It became the first movie in the UK to earn 1 million DVD sales in its first weekend. It was the second highest grossing that year, only behind The Two Towers, and ended up grossing $879 million, receiving universal praise for its darker tone and being a vast improvement to the first movie. But despite its financial success, this was only one of 2 Potter films to not be nominated for any Academy Awards. Though it did receive criticism from Russian lawyers who very nearly sued Warner Brothers as they were convinced that Dobby resembled Vladimir Putin. I can see it.
Are you mad?
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets continued the world building that would support the rest of the series. It introduced crucial lore like Parseltongue and pureblood ideology, and deepened the audience's connection to characters like Ginny Weasley and Dobby, both of whom would become important in future installments. The film also proved that the franchise could handle increasingly mature themes without losing its core identity. The successful adaptation ensured audience trust for the more complex entries to come.
I want to see some punishment!
I love how the entire first movie had the main 3 characters immediately believing that Snape was guilty of absolutely everything before being proven wrong, and yet they still spend this entire movie immediately believing that Malfoy is guilty of absolutely everything before being proven wrong.
But Malfoy, the heir of Slytherin.
Well, maybe Ron's right, Hermione.
Which is weird, because despite finding out that Snape actually saved Harry's life in the last film, the little ungrateful douchebags are still surprised when he defends them in this one. Thankfully, Uncle Vernon is still as cartoonishly evil as possible, with Dudley being as big a dick as possible.
Who'd want to be friends with you?
And Daniel Radcliffe has slightly improved since the first movie. He still has some very bad moments.
What terrible things? Who's plotting them? Are you Tom Riddle? Hello, can you hear me? Give me my wand, Tom.
To clarify, Gilderoy Lockhart knows what the famous Harry Potter looks like, but Arthur Weasley, who works for the Ministry of Magic, has no idea. And Ginny seems freaked out to see him despite meeting him the year prior. And although not quite as memeable as the first movie, it does still get a lot of quotables.
I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise and pretending that I don't exist.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?
How dare you steal that car?
So unlucky I wasn't there. I know exactly the counter-curse that could have spared her.
Why couldn't it be follow the butterflies?
Arthur Weasley is a great character. Not only is he hilarious,
Your sons flew that enchanted car of yours to Surrey and back last night.
Did you really? How'd it go?
I mean,
but he earns a lot of cool points for his confrontation with Lucius Malfoy as well. Jason Isaac's performance is fantastic. It's such an ominous portrayal. But Tom Felton, I'm not really sure what happened. I mean, he foreshadows events later on in the franchise.
Oh, look, Potter. You've got yourself a girlfriend.
But then his performance gets really bad, which is weird considering he was the only good child actor in the first movie.
You think there's someone here who's worse than Dumbledore? Well, do you? Go on, Goyle. You're absolutely right.
What happened? Except they made him a racist now.
You filthy little mudblood.
Although it's worth it for this hilariously improvised line from Felton because he genuinely forgot his line.
Reading.
Reading? Mm-hmm. I didn't know you could read.
Alan Rickman is as fantastic as always, and even the side characters get some pretty funny moments.
Longbottom's been neglecting his earmuffs.
No, ma'am. He's just fainted.
Yes, well, just leave him there.
Although Malfoy about to start a fight with a mandrake root is hilarious.
Pull it.
I'm in the thick of it, everybody knows. They know me where it snows, I skid in and they froze. I don't know nothing but no ice, I'm just cold. 40-something millislops or so, I've been told. I'm in my prime, but this ain't even final form. They know me down, but still my...
Ron receives a letter from his mum yelling at him, and Rupert Grint's reaction is so funny. In fact, later on, his reaction to all of the spiders is brilliant, and there was no acting required here. Rupert Grint genuinely does have a fear of spiders, so this was genuine. Harry's learning all this exposition while Grint just freaks out and is brilliant. The character of Lockhart is also hilarious.
I didn't get rid of the band and banshee by smiling at them. So sorry, dozed off. What have I missed?
After all that stuff you did in your books,
Books can be misleading.
you wrote them.
Even if he goes from bumbling, arrogant dickhead to happy to sacrifice Ginny and erase two children's memories pretty damn quickly, he ends up losing his own memory, which makes it even funnier.
Who are you?
Ron Weasley.
Really? And, who am I?
There's a scene where Ron accidentally curses himself because he's an idiot and ends up throwing up slugs, which does create some pretty good visual effects. But I have to say, Emma Watson is pretty good in this one. What the hell changed in the last year? It's the biggest jump in performance in such a short amount of time I've ever seen. She's great. Quidditch still looks awesome, and the visual effects of Harry being chased by the bludger as he tries desperately to evade it through the crowd looks amazing. It does become quite an intense action scene as he and Draco are trying to avoid it. But Jesus, Harry breaks his arm and he's still more focused on winning Quidditch. Your arm is broken, you weirdo! Although the effects of his boneless arm is also pretty impressive. And Hagrid is as hilarious as always in this one.
Very clearly the bones are not broken.
Broken? There's no bones left.
If anybody was looking for some stuff, then all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders.
There's a pretty cool scene where Harry and Draco have a duel, and yeah, of course this leads to even more casualties at this super safe school. It leads to Harry talking to another terrible CGI snake, and the acting from everybody watching on is pretty damn good, especially the fear in Alan Rickman's face. I will always maintain how good Richard Harris was as Dumbledore. Every single word comes across as so magical. It's such a heartwarming performance. There's a great moment where he asks Harry if there's anything he needs to confess and he denies it. You see disappointment in Harris's face, but at the time it doesn't seem to really mean anything. Before we later get a reaction to see that the exact same thing happened with Tom Riddle. Dumbledore's reaction is fear that Harry may become the new Voldemort, which is such a subtle but cool moment. Really sold by Harris's fearful reaction. Draco just seems to be campaigning to be as evil as possible in the shortest amount of time.
I'm surprised that the Daily Prophet hasn't done a report on all these attacks. I suppose Dumbledore's trying to hush it all up. Father always said that Dumbledore was the worst thing that ever happened to this place.
I also urinate on old ladies and decapitate babies. The set of the chamber looks great, and the performance of Tom Riddle is also brilliant. And at least the effects of the Basilisk look a lot better than the ones of the other snakes in the series. It looks amazing, and at least in this one it requires actual skill for Harry to win, whereas in the last one, love, just love. The movie also ends with two of the best exchange lines being completely improvised by Jason Isaacs and Daniel Radcliffe, which honestly shows a lot of talent and some great chemistry.
Let us hope that Mr. Potter will always be around to save the day.
Don't worry, I will be.
And it is pretty funny how Hermione is the only one upset about exams being cancelled. Robbie Coltrane's performance is always so heartwarming and charming. He's great. Unlike before, there were absolutely no plot holes caused by adapting the book to the film. Nothing that was explained in the novel but not in the movie. None whatsoever.
I'm not allowed to use magic outside of school.
Except flying a car, Hermione fixing your glasses again. Also, you're just letting an owl out. There's a padlock. Why can't you let him out? That's not magic. In fact, you ask your uncle permission 20 seconds later anyway.
If I could only let her out for an hour or two.
So clearly magic isn't the reason there. The movies also never explain why Harry is always sent back to live with his abusive family, whereas in the books we learn that Dumbledore put a spell on them to protect him, but in order for it to work he has to go back there once a year. Although that doesn't explain why he has to go back for the entire summer. Couldn't he just go there, pay a short visit for like a day or an hour or something and then leave? If Dobby can disappear and reappear at will, how is he a prisoner to the Malfoys? Why can't he just escape? And if no one can apparate inside Hogwarts, how is Dobby getting in and out of the castle? Is he Solid Snake? Why doesn't Dobby just just tell Harry why he shouldn't go back to Hogwarts? He keeps punishing himself after telling him things anyway. Just tell him and then punish yourself. I didn't say that. He's also a massive dick to Harry over this. In fact, why doesn't Harry just say, right, okay, Dobby, I won't go back to Hogwarts, and then go back to Hogwarts? Also, if Dobby can only be freed by giving him clothing, doesn't that mean the Malfoys can't actually give him laundry because then that accidentally set him free?
Diagonally.
How does Harry mess that up? In the book, he only says it wrong because he's got soot stuck in his throat. But in this one, that's not the case. How do you mispronounce it when you literally visited there a year earlier? Why would the Weasleys rush onto the platform before making sure that Ron also got on safely? In fact, them being locked out of the platform and then immediately jumping to stealing a car is a pretty big leap. Why not just wait for Ron's parents? I mean, they say,
If we can't get through, maybe Mum and Dad can't get back.
maybe wait 5 minutes. In fact, Dumbledore clearly knows and sees everything. They even acknowledge it.
Dumbledore must know you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man.
So once you don't arrive at the school, I'm sure he'll send someone for you. There's a photo taken of them mid-air, but how the hell does no Muggle spot them taking off in the car park of one of the most populated train stations in London? And why did no one reprimand Hagrid for doing this exact same thing in the last film? Although the green screens of the car flying and almost being crushed is pretty good. No idea how they didn't notice the train or how nobody on the train noticed them, including the driver. Does the Hogwarts Express have a driver? Is it magic fueled?
Silence!
Even Harry holding on for dear life looks pretty damn good. There's a scene where the trio suspects Malfoy being the heir of Slytherin and they're loudly discussing it when Malfoy is clearly walking past them within earshot. How does he not hear them? Then during a Quidditch match, Malfoy says,
Training for the ballet, Potter!
now that line actually makes sense in the book because Harry's doing all of these pirouettes and acrobatics to avoid the bludger. But in the movie, it doesn't make sense because he's not doing any of that. He's just on a broomstick.
Eat slugs.
Where the hell are all of the teachers?
Let's take them to Hagrid.
And not the nurse because... There's also a bit where Hermione gets offended over when Malfoy calls her a mudblood, but this doesn't make any sense. Hermione grew up as a muggle. She's only been exposed to the wizarding world for, what, a year? So she wouldn't even know that that's an offensive term for muggleborns. But she acts like this oppressed witch who's had to put up with this abuse all of her life.
Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born. Someone with non-magic parents. Someone like me.
It's like they just couldn't handle the concept of Hermione not actually knowing something. They couldn't let it go. Throughout the movie, there's so many moments where Hermione is just perfect at everything. She immobilizes an entire room of pixies, whereas she could only do them one at a time in the book. She saves Harry from the rogue bludger. She out of nowhere knows all about the Polyjuice potion, and it's her who finds out everything about the Basilisk off screen. Does she also do a handstand on a unicycle whilst juggling fireworks and reciting the entire play of Hamlet in Portuguese?
That's horrible.
There's a scene where Harry starts to hear the Basilisk and Lockhart doesn't, but I mean, surely he'd still hear a hiss, right? Harry's just hearing the voice, but everyone else would just hear the snake. And when he does actually face it down in the chamber, the snake doesn't talk and all he hears is hissing. Which one is it? Although, to be fair, the snake talking through the fight would be pretty distracting. Ow, you oversized chicken! Now how will I watch the next season of Downton Abbey, you prick? Them turning animals into objects. Isn't this a form of animal abuse? And when would they ever need to use this in real life anyway? Watch out! There's Voldemort! Quick, Harry! One sec, let me just turn this cat into a goblet and chuck it at him.
That wand needs replacing, Mr. Weasley.
Oh yes, I forgot to mention, the movie has a running joke of Ron having a broken wand, so he keeps messing up every single spell and nobody bothers to replace it for him. I mean, you think a magic school would have a spare one lying around? And I know you say, well, the wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Venom, but that's all bollocks. They never stick to it anyway.
I can mend bones in a heartbeat, but growing them back...
You will be able to, won't you?
Oh, I'll be able to, certainly. But it'll be painful.
Can't they use unicorn blood to heal Harry? No, they said it in the last movie. Does that not work anymore? Alright.
You nearly got Ron and me expelled.
No, he didn't. Stealing a flying car in public was totally on you, dude. Why would teachers casually discuss the Chamber of Secrets around sleeping students? Why does Snape use the Expelliarmus spell on Lockhart and Lockhart clearly isn't disarmed? Then again, Lucius tries to use a killing curse on Harry directly in front of Dumbledore's office. Granted, this one was because Jason Isaacs admitted he read the book and just spouted out the only spell he could remember, which Rowling didn't change because... I will also say, this is my first time watching the extended cut of the film, which actually does reduce a lot of problems I have with it and removes a lot of the plot holes. The first time we see Draco and his father isn't actually in the bookshop. This is in the book, but it doesn't actually add anything. The scene of Lockhart giving the kids a quiz about himself is longer but not really needed, but there's a few extra scenes where the trio are convinced Harry is the heir of Slytherin and he starts to question his entire identity. But in the theatrical version, there's a scene where everyone is staring at Harry like he's a weirdo and one of them is Ginny. But in the very next scene, Harry rushes out and hears the Basilisk, but that isn't possible because Ginny would need to be in the Chamber of Secrets to control it. However, in the extended cut, there's a bunch of scenes put in between, building on Harry's identity crisis. So this gets rid of that plot hole, makes it possible, and makes a lot more sense.
Professor, you need to stop. You're being too silly.
Professor, you need to stop. 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 Professor, you need to stop.
I swear I didn't.
You know, you'd think in the wizarding world there'd be some kind of truth spell or something. There's an interesting scene where Harry questions the sorting hat, but...
You would have done well in Slytherin.
You're wrong.
Then why did you ask him? I also feel like the theatrical version just has them prepare the polyjuice potion, but it takes a month for it to be ready, so they just walk around killing time. Whereas in the extended cut, there's vital character development involved, so it feels more fluid. There are some cool visual effects of them turning into Crabbe and Goyle after taking the polyjuice potion, despite them keeping their own voices, whereas in the books they also take on the voices of the person they gain the image of. The extended cut also includes a lot more scenes of the kids learning about Tom Riddle's history, which works a lot better in progressing the story. My issue with the theatrical version was that the plot was just way too convenient with how everything just gets wrapped up so perfectly. In fact, there's a lot of plot conveniences in this movie. Like the kids learning about the plant that just so happens to be the one that will cure everyone later, the car turning up out of nowhere to save Harry and Ron from Aragog, Dumbledore conveniently knowing that Harry is staying with the Weasleys, Dobby conveniently not telling Harry that he works for the Malfoys, the Sword of Gryffindor conveniently turning up in the sorting hat at just the right moment, Harry finding a convenient bit of paper with all of the information they need, and Hermione's petrified hand that somehow nobody found upon discovering her body.
Why is it no one's dead?
Because this movie doesn't have balls! In fact, why isn't the snake killing anyone? It just petrifies people, they turn into stone, and then what? It just awkwardly slithers away? And how are none of the ghosts around the castle seeing the snake? Seriously, it's so contrived how they get away with nobody dying in this. A cat sees the snake in a puddle, Colin sees it through a camera, Justin sees it through nearly headless Nick, Hermione sees it through a mirror. Just kill someone! And how are they getting a look at the snake anyway? Is he just poking his head out to randomly say hello?
Can you tell me?
Why is Harry reading out loud everything he's writing? It's almost like he knows he's in a movie.
All students will be escorted to each lesson by a teacher.
How are you going to do that when there's 9 million students and about 12 teachers? Hagrid asks the kids to hide under the invisibility cloak and to be quiet, and Ron immediately speaks, the dumbass. It is a pretty cool moment as Dumbledore can see them under the cloak, but how the hell can he see them under the cloak? How can he see them under the cloak? Is Dumbledore God? However, the extended cut does have some downsides. They come across the car in the woods early on, which ruins the reveal later when it comes to their rescue. But why on Snape's nutsack did Hagrid suggest the kids go to see Aragog in the first place? Surely he'd know he wouldn't be loyal to the kids and would try to eat them, and it's never acknowledged.
If Hagrid ever gets out of Azkaban, I'll kill him.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, what was the point of sending us in there?
That's what I'm saying.
What have we found out?
We know one thing. Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets.
No, I'm not having this. The movie ends with Hagrid coming back and everyone claps, but why? They're happy he's back, I guess, but you're clapping at him for walking through a door? Although it is funny to see Malfoy get annoyed at his friend for clapping. My issue is, this would still make sense without the spider scene. So they go through the forest just to get attacked and get chased out the woods. Surely it would have been far better to leave the audience in the dark for the majority of the film. Have the flashback, oh wow, maybe Hagrid has a dark side, and open the chamber. Harry and Ron then enter, they, for the second film in a row, find a convenient way to leave Ron out of the climax and discover that it was Ginny. Hagrid's name is cleared and he gets released, and then it makes sense for everyone to celebrate so much, but it doesn't work when we already know that he was innocent. And why does Aragog explain all of this to the kids before attacking them anyway?
Wish you were here, Hermione.
I mean, she is. She's right there! This is another thing. In the theatrical version, Hermione is written out for a good portion of the film, whereas in the extended cut, it doesn't happen until the last hour. There is a pretty sweet scene at the end, which was almost a complete accident. The script had Hermione hug Harry and Ron, but Emma Watson was 11 at the time and was genuinely embarrassed to have to hug them in front of everyone. So this was changed to just her hugging Harry, which only added to the foreshadowing of her later relationship with Ron.
An excellent suggestion!
How does Harry even speak Parseltongue to open the chamber when he doesn't realise he's doing it most of the time? It's at this point that we learn Tom Riddle is actually Voldemort, which is really weird because he claims he's disgusted by his father's name, but he's totally okay with an anagram of it. Why does Tom Riddle reveal his entire plan to Harry anyway? Is he a Bond villain?
Your bird may have blinded the basilisk, but it can still hear you.
Snakes are deaf. On a technicality, they feel their way through the vibrations in the air, but they are still technically deaf. They can't hear. Also, the Basilisk's venom should definitely either kill Harry or at least destroy him as a Horcrux. It's almost as if this franchise wasn't planned out correctly and it was written by a moron.
I guess you have little more than a minute to live.
Or since it's a movie, about 3. How does Harry even know to use the Basilisk's fang to destroy the diary?
Why then did the sorting hat place you in Gryffindor?
Because I asked it to.
No, you didn't. But other than that, makes perfect sense. You know what? The theatrical version I consider not very good. Still enjoyable, but poorly written and so contrived, but the extended version is significantly superior. A lot better character development, and though some scenes could still have been dropped, it's a lot of fun, so I will say Chamber of Secrets is a pretty decent follow-up, no matter which version you check out. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets may have been darker, moodier, and more dangerous, but it never lost sight of the magic. It was a critical bridge between childhood childhood whimsy and the coming emotional complexity of the series. With dazzling effects, deeper themes, and memorable performances, it remains a fan favourite and a turning point in the saga's cinematic evolution.